Who could be better than a cardiologist Kriya yogi to tell us more about the aspects and medical benefits of yoga? I would like to welcome Dr. Indranill Basu Ray, our guest for today. Dr. Basu Ray is a cardiologist super specialized in one of the most niche areas of cardiology, one of the newest branches of cardiology called interventional cardiac electrophysiology, besides having been an author, researcher, and meditator for over 3 decades. He's trained in medicine, cardiology, and cardiac electrophysiology from India and the US, with his US training having been at Harvard, Tulane, Texas Heart Institute, and the Baylor College of Medicine. He's one of the 7 cardiologists who wrote down the practice guidelines for physicians on behalf of the American Heart Association on the role of meditation in cardiovascular diseases. Dr. Basu Ray is the editor of the world's first book on the role of yoga in cardiovascular diseases called The Principle and Practice of Yoga in Cardiovascular Medicine. I would like to welcome you, sir.
Thank you very much. It is a pleasure being with you today, Mrityunjay.
Now coming to the medical side of things, I mean, there are some questions which have been raised at various points. There are various seminal works that have been done. So over the last decade, for instance, a growing number of research studies have shown that the practice of Hatha Yoga has helped in control, such as physiological variables related to blood pressure, heart rate, and respiration. However, as per some other scholars like Sridharan Ramaratnam, no effects of yoga have been seen convincingly for diseases such as, let's say, epilepsy that do not have a neuromuscular or a neurovascular involvement as such. So what is your medical take on where, why, and how yoga positively impacts the human body as such?
Right. So I'm not surprised. You have to understand that you cannot expect yoga to be a panacea for all diseases. However, there is evidence that yoga actually can be beneficial even in epilepsy as a complementary treatment, but that's a talk for a separate day. Coming to the main thing, it must be understood that the principal work of yoga is to relieve stress. And stress is the harbinger for most cardiovascular disease, which include heart attack, stroke, hypertension, diabetes, and a plethora of other diseases. These diseases today are called non-communicable disease or lifestyle diseases, and they're responsible for 65 to 70% of deaths in every known country in the world. And it is getting worse in low-income countries like Africa, like Asia, like Oceania, like India, because it's already #1 killer in rich countries like the Western Europe and America. So you have to understand that this is where yoga has a salutary effect, both preventing the disease, which is called primary prevention, and also to prevent recurrence of the disease. So today you have a bypass surgery, you are treated with a stent, or you get a bypass surgery, you have a heart attack. Sorry, I take that back. You have a heart attack and you get a bypass surgery or stent. Stents or bypass surgery is not a cure. It's just a symptomatic relief from the heart disease. Tomorrow you'll get another. Day after tomorrow you'll get another. So every time you get some of these stents and bypass surgery, A, you increase your risk of dying because all these are invasive procedure. 2, they're extremely costly. And some of the countries like say India, in 2025, it is stated that India will be world's #1 country as far as heart attacks is concerned. It will beat United States of America. So imagine a country like India, the economic devastation that will cause, because India is getting rich day by day, but it's still not considered a super rich country because we still have people dying on the streets without having money to pay for treating tuberculosis or malaria, which are treated at 100 times the cost than a heart disease. So when you have an epidemic of heart disease and people dying left, right, and center out of that, imagine the economic devastation that will ensue. So it's important to understand that. And not only that, see, we have things to learn from the West also. Between 1990s to 2000, there's been almost 30 to 50% increase in heart diseases, which is exclusively because of lifestyle. So if these people had taken up lifestyle changes like yoga, as I said, is the world's best and most followed lifestyle medicine, where you have a change in diet, you have change in your behavior pattern, you have change, you do practices like pratyahara, which is concentration, dharana, which is mindfulness, and dhyana, which is meditation. So it's one package that controls everything. It controls the body by doing exercises. And remember, the exercises are with modulated breathing. So asana, as I said, has less powerful prevent disease when just done over the mat. But when you combine asana with controlled breathing, it becomes a powerful technique. But still not powerful enough to cure your stress, to prevent you to get heart disease. That's where the mental part of yoga comes in. That's where pratyahara comes in. Pratyahara means taking your mind off other objects which produce stress. Then comes mindfulness. So in the Western world, there's a sudden realization, oh, let's get mindful, let's get mindful. What they don't understand is this has been there in yoga for 10,000 years. This is nothing new. So being mindful, and like, for example, concentrating on your breath. And then comes dhyana, which is meditation. And there has been tons of studies where blood pressure is controlled, diabetes is better controlled, heart attack is prevented through practice of these things. So it's important to remember that this is one powerful disease, the one powerful way to prevent a large number of disease. Does that mean it cures everything? No. Absolutely. You cannot have a panacea for everything.
You mentioned about so coming to the first couple of stages of the Ashtanga Yoga kind of system. You have spoken about asanas and you have spoken about pranayam. So if we could go into a little more detail on both of these. So my first question would be to do with asanas. So we have in Hatha Yoga, for instance, various asanas which involve standing, balancing, bending, twisting in various ways. So if you were to keep the holistic goal of yoga, right, which is the union with one's inner self in mind, a question that often comes up is how do these postures help the practitioner in that pursuit? And more practically, of course, how does that help in terms of well-being, overall well-being of a person who is practicing yoga as such?
Yeah, so actually it does massive changes because Hatha Yoga, you have to understand, is really not just physical exercises. Physically doing an exercise along with modulated breath is important in Hatha Yoga. So Hatha Yoga by itself, without the modulated breath, is a good physical exercise, is a good cardiovascular exercise, but it takes you to the next paradigm when you practice breathing along with it. So breathing does a couple of miraculous things. Number one, breathing accentuates the parasympathetic system and immediately decreases your stress, immediately is protective to the heart. Second is when you do Hatha Yoga along with certain breathing techniques, for example, say Brahmaradi Pranayam, you produce what is called nitric oxide, a powerful chemical inside the blood vessels of your brain, of your heart, of your legs, which prevent heart disease, heart attacks, strokes, and a bunch of other things. So each and every part of yoga, it's important that the rishis have discovered has a very powerful role. So none of them should be done in isolation. Each and every role, each and every part has a specific role, and that's how it has been designed. So the initial part, as I said, the last part or the other parts like pratyahara, mindfulness, dharana, and dhyana are more with the mind. Similarly, the initial part that is practicing asanas with modulated breathing, that is pranayama. That's why pranayama is not just breathing. All of us breathe. Actually, Swami Vivekananda actually said, pranayama is not just breathing. It's not I'm saying. He said it is controlling the prana or the energy. Again, we don't have scientific equivalent for that, which is fine. But what we do know, and that is very, very scientific, is its effect. We have seen the effect, like when you are stressed out, you have sympathetic discharge. Sympathetic discharge can cause your heart to go fast and you die. And that's not rare. By the time I started, at least 10 to 15 Americans would have died. Why? Every 2 minutes, an American dies for what is known as sudden cardiac death. There is a massive release of sympathetic discharge in the brain and the body, the release of dangerous chemical, which kills people. And how even before you get, say, it takes 6 minutes or 8 minutes or 10 minutes for an ambulance or helicopter to come to you in the US to pick you up if you dial 911. Even in that time, 70% of people die. Whereas people who practice hatha yoga along with breathing, you can completely prevent this by exciting the parasympathetic and subduing the sympathetic. So that, as you correctly said, it's very, very important to understand that not only asanas are very important, but it has to be done in the right style. It has to be done with appropriate
I
modulation
think
of
the
breath
contextualization and
to
the
achieve the
integration of
maximum
these
benefit.
various elements within the larger fold. I mean, it's so wonderful to know about how it was almost engineered, it was customized to kind of have a comprehensive, well-being of the practitioner in mind, and done so far, back in time. I mean, and it persists. It has the relevance that has been proven medically speaking. So I think that's an amazing thing to kind of consider and know about. So while Ashtanga Yoga is arguably the most widely followed system, there are other styles of yoga as well, ranging from Vinayog, Bikram Yoga, there is Kundalini Yoga, to Kripalu and Integral Yoga as well. So if you could please tell us about what are the differences between these disparate systems of yoga, and where did these variations come about? Like what were the underlying kind of principles and elements which kind of brought about these variations as such?
So you see, most of these are variation of the basic Ashtanga yoga. Some of these variations have been brought about by people like Krishnamachari, who are the pioneers to bring yoga to the West, and they have a meaning. For example, Vinayog and all, they have slower movements. So they are all modifications. However, some form of them may not be that helpful. For example, Vikram Yoga is doing the same yoga, but at a very high temperature. And that can actually be dangerous. It can lead to muscle damages, electrolyte imbalance, and even death. There are clinical reports of people having one or more of this. So, but the fact also has to be understood that many of these names are being discovered or branded because some people wanted to use a specific name and brand it so that they could sell it. It's more like a corporate idea of making money out of this. They are basically the same Ashtanga Yoga repackaged or rebranded to make money out of it. And to show people or rather fool people and say, oh, this is better, or my yoga is better, my yoga is more effective, or my yoga is the only one that works. So you got to pay me money to learn my yoga, whereas basically this is the same Ashtanga Yoga with minimal variations. So unfortunately, that is what has been going on for a long time, and people have made billions and millions of rupees and dollars trying to fool other people with all these fancy names. But it's just the same basic Ashtanga Yoga. Having said that, certain yogas, as I said, some of the leaders of who introduced yoga, like Krishnamachari ji and all, they have made variations of yoga to make it more usable for the West, which makes sense. Their intention was very pure to make yoga more accessible to the Western audience, Western people. However, there are certain other yogas which has got other connotations. For example, Kriya Yoga, Kundalini Yoga, these have some other connotations, though. So yoga, remember, human body is considered multi-dimensional in the Hindu philosophical concept. I don't have an exact scientific equivalent of that because science obviously doesn't believe that. Science believes the body you see is the only body we have. But based on Hindu philosophy, there are three different bodies, and these three bodies, the other two bodies, like I'm a guy who goes inside people's heart. That doesn't mean I can see anything else other than the normal heart, because the other bodies are not visible to a surgeon or a cardiologist like me because they exist supposed to be in a different plane or a higher plane or at a higher vibration than what we physically can see. So these yogas take advantage of that, and what they do is that they activate super oxygenation inside the body by activating these energy centers inside the body. So the subtle body that we have is supposed to have multiple energy centers, but out of that, there are 7 energy centers which are called chakras at different levels. And these are, so Kriya Yoga is basically a technique which activates the chakras, causing super oxygenation of the body and activation of these vortices of energy to reach what is called a superhuman state. Now, if somebody doesn't believe it, that is fine. But and there is nothing is lost in nothing is lost in translation, because as long as you practice, you get the benefit. Whether you believe it or not doesn't matter. But having said that, the point that I want to make is there are variations of yoga. Some of them are real variations to make things more easy. Remember, yoga at that one time was being practiced only by people who are monks. Now yoga is being practiced in every household. And that's the power of Kriya Yoga. Kriya Yoga system was created so that every householder can learn yoga and practice just like a monk without following the rules and regulation, which is very strict for monkhood. But at the same time, you still have a lot of charlatans who have created all this new yoga just to make money out of that,
You
which is
mentioned
tragic.
about Kriya Yoga, and I mean, I introduced the viewers to your journey as such in a very preliminary way of sorts. We would love to know about your journey within Kriya Yoga and what your guru as well, kind of how he guided your journey in terms of integrating the medicinal side of things, the pursuit of medicine as such, and Kriya Yoga on the other hand, and how to bring them together. If you could please let us know.
Yeah. So the question is, when I was a kid, I was a little crazy. I was trying to find out what God is. So there was a time when I went to almost all the monks at that time, and sort of spiritual heads all over India. My father was very supportive in this. He took me to different people. But then I was looking for somebody who, as Swami Vivekananda said, that a sadhu is somebody who has everything and leaves for being a sannyasi. It's not that you come from a very poor family and you don't have food in your house, so you'll end up in the nearest ashram. And then after 60 years, you become a big sadhu. It's not like that. If you look at Indian philosophy, the biggest names, starting from Adi Shankara to Swami Vivekananda, Maharishi, Arvind, everybody could live a well-to-do, economically very good life, with very good education, but they left everything for sannyas. And even Maharaj Shivanandaji, he was a physician actually. So the same story. So I was looking for somebody like that, and I came to find my guru. My guru was a textile engineer. I think he passed in 37 or 35. At that time, you could count in your fingers how many people became an engineer in India. And then he took sannyas at that young age. So Kriya Yoga is a very powerful system, and it's supposed to be started by somebody called Mahavatar Babaji. Nobody really knows who he really is. Some people say he is the Gorakhnath from the Gorakh, there is the Matsendranath Gorakhnath, he's Baba Gorakhnath. But anyway, long story short, and then his disciple is Lahiri Baba. Lahiri Baba's disciple is Yukteswar Giri. And Yukteswar Giri's disciple is both my guru and Paramahansa Yogananda. So after Vivekananda, Swami Vivekananda, who introduced yoga to the West, the person who did maximum spread of yoga and the science of yoga in the West is Paramahansa Yogananda. And as you know, Steve Jobs in his iPad had only one book, that is the autobiography of a yogi written by Paramahansa Yogananda, which he read multiple times. He said he read it every year in his life, and every time it gave him a new meaning. So my guru always was telling me I need to be a physician, I need to be a cardiologist. Heart is where the soul lies, it seems. And so after Vivekananda spread yoga to the West, yoga has spread like wildfire. There are millions and billions of people practicing yoga all over the world. But you have to understand that yoga is more, as I said, is more than somebody just bending their back in a mat. It is much more than that. It has a breathing technique. It has got mental control. It has got a lot of things. And if you don't practice all of this, who is the loser? You yourself, because it's like I'm telling you that I have a whole property, a few $1 billion to give you, and you're coming and asking me for a small candy. It's just like that. It is. It's on the verge of being stupid. So that so my guru wanted that as a physician trained in both modern medicine, some of the best institutes in America, we have to bring the science of yoga to the common people. This has two reasons. One is, you see, the world is going through so many tumultuous times. You know, we had just COVID, millions died. Now we have economic recession. So people are suffering. This is one way where you can reduce suffering. And as I said, I don't know, it is attributed to Gautama Buddha, but I'm not sure who said it. It said that if you're born on earth, pain is mandatory. So I repeat, if you're born on earth, pain is mandatory, but suffering is optional. So yoga is the most powerful technique to make suffering optional. If you're coming on earth, if you're living a normal life, if you're not God, you will suffer. Even the so-called God on earth suffered, whether it's Jesus Christ. I mean, he was put up in a and they drilled nails into his body. And even at that time, when they were drilling nails into his body, instead of cursing these people, he was saying, God, bless them. They don't know what they are doing. And that has been there in Hindu philosophy. Thousands of saints, I mean, they sent a mad elephant to kill Buddha because Buddha, just despite being a simple saint, the whole world knew him and nobody knew the king. So king was so angry that he said, this man must be killed. While coming to kill Buddha, that elephant killed 25 people, but it just came near Buddha and bent its head and fell in its feet. A mad, crazy elephant. So this is the power of yoga that every man should know. And every man should practice. It is not a means where some people can fool others and make money. It is something that has to be spread wild, like a wildfire, so that every human being can use it scientifically for
So you
bettering
mentioned
their
about
life,
the
to make
autobiography
the
of
earth a better
Yogi, and
place.
I mean, I have loved reading that the piece, the work, essentially, and it's a seminal work uh, given the 20th century kind of Hindu thought and yoga in general. One of the most fascinating subjects that comes from the book and from yoga at times is that of siddhis, right? And I want to kind of take it to this place because there are some self-proclaimed rationalists, self-proclaimed cynics, skeptics, essentially, and well, they try to kind of gauge these ideas from a certain rational, a certain kind of scientific perspective. For instance, you also mentioned about Kundalini, you mentioned about chakras, the energy centers. So their narrative is that if it is an energy center, then why isn't it discernible? Why isn't it measurable, for instance? And so on. So is it a case of misinterpretation in the sense of the level at which we are perceiving it, for instance, the spiritual and the empirical? And what are the ways in which one can kind of stand one's ground, essentially, when it comes to such counters to the yogic system, essentially, given these elements that have been written about from times immemorial?
Right. So the question is, I don't even want to stand the ground. The reason is very simple. If you have passed, this is the way I put it. Okay. So if you are going to school, you understand apple falling, what Newton said is gravity. So maybe you do MSc in physics, then gravity is basically a sort of energy that is responsible for things going around the sun. Maybe when you do your PhDs, then maybe there's a particle called graviton, which we haven't discovered. Then you do. And maybe you go after that, then you might say, okay, maybe it's made of a bunch of strings. We don't know what configuration of strings creates a graviton. So when a class 8 guy, so-called rationalist, trying to say what a graviton is, this is what is going to happen. So why do I have to stand the ground? Because it is a waste of my time. So if I don't have the knowledge of class 8 and I try to find out what is happening Like, for example, I'm a physician, and tomorrow I consider myself, I know more quantum physics than Mrityunjay Guha Majumdar, who has done his PhD in quantum physics. What would you call me? Would you call me stupid? No, you'll call me something worse than that. So I just don't even waste my time in trying to explain, because a couple of things. See, I do understand that where they come from, and I respect that, because a lot of things that have been told in spirituality is not at the material level, because the universe itself is not at the material level. A small fraction of the universe is at the material level, and even at the material level, as I said, the brain sees it because the brain is trained to do this, what we call controlled hallucination. So your brain is hallucinating to show you a reality which doesn't really exist. So when a sadhu wearing a ochre robe tells you this, you'll think this guy is crazy. The unfortunate or the fortunate part is when the same thing is told by the likes of Einstein, he said, oh my God, that's a great science. And I'll give you a living example. My grandmom used to keep, have all these rituals. I'll call it rituals now, because at that time it was called rituals. And she used to do fasting. And for this puja or that puja. And she died pretty old and not given any disease. She died of older age, no cancer, no heart disease, nothing. Today, women have massive heart attacks and other problems. So what she did, our so-called great rationalists would call it rituals. But in 2017, when they got a Nobel Prize for intermittent fasting, today every Tom, Dick, and Harry is fasting throughout the day, just like what my grandmom did. So what the sannyasis said had a science at that time. But you have to understand, over thousands of years, the science got dissolved and rituals came into part. So what she actually did had a scientific basis, but the practice was ritualistic because she didn't know the scientific basis. She was a poor, uneducated woman. That doesn't change the science behind it. So my question is very clear. I don't care what the rationalist says, because rationalist has no they are saying is based on knowledge which is not complete knowledge, partial knowledge. And there's one more thing in Hindu philosophy, that Hindu philosophy says it is a royal path. What does that mean? You don't have to care what Buddha said. You don't have to care what Swami Vivekananda said, because if there was a Buddha, if there was a Swami Vivekananda, if there was even so-called Shiva or Narayan, the path they went through, even you will go through that path, because in Hindu philosophy, the beginning and the end is same. There is no special God and special children of God. Everything starts from the same place. Everything ends in the same place. So try the path out. If you, on the way to the path, if you feel these are all fraud, like what the so-called rationalists say, don't do it.
Yes.
And if you feel it works for you, you do it. So I am a physician scientist. I'm the most rationalist in the world, because I don't believe in anything that is not science. But the fact is that the science itself is restricted. Tell me, 100 years back, if I told you that the whole world is a sea foam of particles being created and destroyed, nothing called material exists, would you believe me? You'll see I am either a drunkard or a drug addict or a complete lunatic. I mean, the first time they had string theory, there were only 12 people going to that conference. Now there are almost 5,000 physicists go to those conferences. So the fact is that science changes things. So these rationalists will change when the science improves. Science takes us to the next level of understanding.
Right.
As long as it doesn't, God bless them, let them have their own belief. If it helps me, you take that belief, do it, try it yourself, see if it helps you. If it helps you, follow it. If it doesn't help you, don't do it. That's the core of Hindu philosophy. It's a thing that's what my guru used to say. 1 ounce of practice is called 1 ton of theory. What does that mean? You have people going around in India who are Chaturvedi. They have read 4 Vedas. They know every line of the Gita. But they are as miserable as you and me. So what is the use of knowing all the Upanishads and all the Gita and still you're as miserable as me? So my guru used to say there's no use having theoretical knowledge. You have to practice Kriya. Kriya Yoga is a practical science. You have to practice breathing. You have to practice meditation. You have to practice mindfulness. And after practice, you see that these are all a bunch of useless people have told us everything that is lies and fraud. My friend, what has been existing for 10,000 years cannot be a fraud. I don't care what rationalist says. Whether it is scientific or not, yes, there are a lot of things which may not be scientific. Even 200 years back, when Jules Verne wrote about a boat going under the ocean, people thought he was drunk and he was talking nonsense. Today, we have few thousand submarines sitting deep inside Pacific Ocean, in the bottom of Pacific Ocean, the nuclear submarine. So 200 years back, this was just a dream. When he wrote about a ship going to the moon, they thought this is just a good fantasy. Today, God knows how many things went to the moon. I mean, we have gone to the Mars also. Even India sent a to the Mars. So, my friend, science is a dynamic subject. What is not scientific today will become scientific tomorrow. And my question to people who have such question is, my friend, this is a physical trial, dynamic path. Try it yourself. If you like the shirt, you wear it. If you don't like the shirt, don't wear it. It's just as simple as that. You don't have to fight anybody.
That's a
You
very
don't have
important
to
point. I mean,
make
the whole
big
idea
theories.
that it's a very
Try it out and see.
accessible, a very egalitarian. That's a very commonly used buzzword nowadays in certain circles. Egalitarian kind of approach, right? I mean, anyone and everyone can, with the right kind of efforts, with the right kind of also guidance, essentially, can approach it and see for themselves, right? I mean, if it is not true, if it is incorrect in certain ways, then so be it. And I think that is an important point, which even in the Vedas, for instance, we have a very agnostic way in which things like the Nasade Sukta, for instance, when it kind of concludes with its famous line on whether the final reality is, understandable by the God above, or even maybe he doesn't. It's not that they are kind of commenting as much as they are trying to put forward this perspective, which is that, you can approach it and you can see for yourself whether it is true or not. So I think that's a very important point. Yeah, sorry, sir.
No, that's a very important point you made. In that, in the Sutra, Rigveda actually says that even gods were created after the universe was created. So nobody knows how it has been created. Look at Patanjali Yoga Sutra. It is just a manual. It does not talk about God. So it's very interesting to understand is that the entire Patanjali Yoga Sutra doesn't talk about God. Out of the 196 aphorisms, only 3 aphorisms are on actual asanas. The rest are on other things. So it's like I have a Tesla which can self-drive from place A to place B. I don't read the manual. I drive it like a broken ambassador. Nobody is stopping me. Just like a broken ambassador, to still go from place A to place B. But if I read the manual, I can get up on the car, put the appropriate button in the computer to drive me. So Patanjali Yoga Sutra is similarly just a manual. You read it, you can drive a Tesla out of your body and achieve everything you want in mind. If you don't want to read it, you don't want to follow it, God bless you. You can drive your body like a broken Toyota or a broken ambassador, which needs repair every other day.
Associated with this
God
is
bless
to do
you,
with
my friend.
when people kind of again cynics try to put forward this idea that the effects of yoga, right? I mean, we have discussed quite a few biological, physiological effects and benefits that we have, and they try to kind of put it to the physical exercise components without and devoid of the contextualized, the comprehensive tradition as such, right? So, for instance, there are researchers like Durai Swami who have written about, how the yogasanas are more potent with, for instance, controlled breathing and various other elements, as against just physical exercises to reduce symptoms in patients with various health problems as such. So, how would you scientifically, this correlation, this integration of sorts, which you have mentioned previously about, is so very important in yoga, and it's not just an array of physical exercise components and certain elements as such. How would you put that forward? How would you kind of counter that kind of argument from these self-proclaimed? Yeah.
Yeah, because, 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 yeah Yeah, those who say that, they are just ignorant of the science behind it, because there has been tons of studies which actually showed that when you have, let's say, they took patients with hypertension, diabetes, and bunch of other diseases, and they showed that some people were given only asanas, some people were given asanas, given only meditation, and it showed, especially in older people, meditation had more effect in bringing down the blood pressure. Similarly, there were trials comparing yoga with Zumba and other exercises, and they showed yoga was way powerful in bringing changes than Zumba or other exercises. So, and these have been published in medical journals. These are not like some Tom, Dick, and Harry talking some nonsense. These are actual clinical trials in medical journals. So, I mean, I don't even give credence to such things, because these are from people who have no scientific basis of what they're talking. Because there was a time maybe when we did not have scientific basis, but now we have tons of studies that support this, that not only the mental part plays a powerful role, sometimes even more than the physical part of Hatha Yoga, but the total combination is extremely powerful. Zumba is a fantastic exercise. It does a lot of good things. I, as a cardiologist, strongly support it. But there are actual research which compared Zumba with people doing yoga, and yoga had a better effect. What will you say to that? So the guys who are saying this, they are just peripheral people with no idea of the science. So I wouldn't give much credence, and I would not waste my time, because remember, my job as a physician is to help my patients. I don't carry a baggage of a religion, of a philosophy, of an ideology. The only baggage I carry is my job is to make my patients free of diseases, free of their suffering. So I don't care what other people are ideologues, or what other thought process people have, and what other political and other initiative or things that might force people to say such things. As long as it is scientific, it is proved in medical journals, it is published.
You mentioned
I'm going to
previously
do
in one
it.
of the responses about how the Western kind of medicine system looks at certain symptoms, looks at certain ailments, and sometimes in isolation, which is very different from the way in which traditional yoga literature has been kind of prescribed, has been looked at, which is, that it is a more comprehensive, more integrated kind of science of sorts. Now, the challenge that, people often, they try to kind of match, physiological or psychiatric disorder with specific kinds of practices of yoga, for instance, for treatment purposes, for alleviation and rehabilitation, and various other preventive measures as well. And there is no consensus as such among various yoga therapists who are there as we speak today. So how do you see us facilitating a consensus among the yoga therapists to come out of, let's say, sometimes even dogmatic belief-based positions, and view the interventions objectively for, let's say, scientific testing, for the ways in which it physiologically kind of benefits the people who are coming to them?
That's a good point. So there are two ends to this problem, and both needs to be come to one single place. As you correctly said, on one end is the modern medicine, which considers mind, body as separate. So the good thing is modern medicine has already changed. Modern medicine now understands that mind, body is not two separate entities. And there's only a few diseases called psychosomatic illnesses where mind causes illness of the body, which was the traditional concept for maybe 400 years. In the last 10, 20, 30 years, we now know mind, body are entangled entity, where everything that happens in the mind has ramifications in the body, and the body equally conveys everything that is happening in the mind. Everything that's happening in the body to the mind, and it's an interactive complex. And the interaction takes place at multiple levels, at the level of blood cells, at the level of nerves, at the level of exchanging neurotransmitters. There are huge, there's complete new science about it. So modern medicine is retracing back its steps of understanding that body as a whole. Because the problem is that when you become a gastroenterologist and you just think about the stomach, and then you start thinking about liver, and then you become a hepatologist, then you start thinking about single cell, that has not got us very far. You have to still think, despite being a gastroenterologist, despite being a cardiologist, you have to think about the whole body. And that concept has come back, especially with these non-communicable diseases, as I said, that causes 70% of death globally. And it's the leading cause of death and leading cause of diseases. Like almost 150 to 160 million Americans live with heart disease. I think it's 2 to 3 times that number in India, people with diabetes and hypertension. So with that, it is important to understand that it's time to change concepts, and concepts are being changed. And modern medicine, that's why in the United States of America, a lot of research is going into the role of yoga and how it can work. So that is one point, as I said. So they are trying to come to the center. The other point, as I said, is the dogmatic views of some of the yoga practitioners. Most of these dogmas come because of lack of education. I mean, India, what happens is just because if you can stand on your head for half an hour, you become a big yogi. That's not a yogi. That's not what Swami Vivekananda is. That's not what Maharishi Arvind is. That's not what Ramakrishna Paramahansa is. So yoga has got physical component, but a large part of it is the mental component, and which is the one which takes you to the superhuman status. So you need the yoga, and yoga therapy is a medical subject. It is not meant for illiterate, uneducated people just because they can do some postures to become yoga therapists. And nowadays, medical schools have started teaching people yoga. That is what we need also all over India and all over the world. Medical school, allopathic medical school particularly, should teach yoga to their medical students. And yoga therapy should be taken up by doctors. It doesn't have to be allopathic doctors. All the form of doctors, allopathic, homeopathic, Ayurvedic doctors, like in America, there are naturopaths who should take it up, because lifestyle medicine is lifestyle is the biggest killer in the world now. And you have to break that vicious cycle of lifestyle problems like heart disease, cancers. Only way to break it is by changing the medicine you practice. So the dogma will go away once you give them education. Once you make sure that yoga and yoga therapists are not some studio people who have not even passed class 8, just because they can do some posture, they consider themselves big doctors giving a yoga therapy. That's inappropriate. The yoga therapy should be given by physicians or trained clinicians. You don't have to be a physician always, but you have to be a trained clinician who understands the physiology, who understands the pathophysiology, who understands the disease, and can accordingly prescribe appropriate therapy and lifestyle changes. Once you do that, you see they'll come together. Neither any dogmas will stand in the line, neither any ideologies will stand in the line, neither there'll be any competition before with competitive thoughts, because it's all one. There's nothing two. It's our lack of knowledge is creating multiple competitive thoughts. Once you have the knowledge, you find. I am trained in modern medicine all my life, both in India and America. So I don't find any competition whatsoever between one thought and the other. They can come together very easily. And the parts that don't come together, give it some more years, it will. I mean, there's more research going on in both the fronts. There's more research in modern medicine, more research in yoga too. So it's just a question of time. But already we have enough to save people from dying every day, millions dying from use of yoga as part of our treatment
how they are
for
so
heart
very
disease.
important in affecting the populations across in various countries, and we will have a focused discussion on that in the next interaction that we will be having. So to bring all of the discussion that we have had today around, how do you see the evolution of the yogic practice and the tradition going forward, particularly from a scientific perspective?
So what I'm seeing is that yoga therapy will become existing part of therapy almost everywhere in the West. As you know, it has already become an important part of any therapy. All the top cancer institutes in America have yoga teachers that teach yoga to cancer patients. They have different departments, starting from MD Anderson, which is world's #1 cancer center. The veteran system has also started what is called whole health in America, which gives patient treatment using yoga and other multifaceted procedures for health other than modern medicine. So this it's now almost a revolution in the West, and I think India is slowly picking up, where modern medicine and lifestyle therapies are coming together. Yoga is the most researched lifestyle medicine known to mankind, and it is practiced by millions all over the world. So it is, as I said, the forest fire has already started. It will not take many years to make sure that everybody knows about it and practice it. Because you have to understand, modern medicine is great, it saves life, but it comes at a price. Number two, you don't have to, for yoga, you don't have to pay to a doctor. You don't even have to go to a doctor. You don't have to pay to a pharmaceutical company to buy costly drugs. Or you don't have to pay to your insurance. You can sit at home in your own sofa, in your own room, learn good techniques and practice daily to keep yourself healthy and have a long, productive life. So the options are so alluring that nothing in this universe can stop it unless can stop it. The only thing that is stopping us now is lack of education, and we need to aggressively pass the education on.
Thank you,
to
sir.
every man
I
in
mean,
this
there's so
universe.
many things, so many thoughts that have come to the fore. Yoga being the integrated, comprehensive well-being tradition with its various contextualized and relevant, I mean, utilitarian kind of perspectives, right? I mean, it benefits us in so many ways in day-to-day life, be it in terms of health, in terms of mindfulness, not in the way the West kind of often puts it forward, but in a more integrated manner. So I would like to thank you, sir, for giving us these invaluable insights and perspectives. I look forward to discussing with you about lifestyle diseases going forward. And potentially, I would like to inform the viewers that we will be having an interaction on consciousness as well, which is something that Dr. Indranill Basu Ray has been working on, has written on as well. So thank you, sir, for coming today. So I would like to close here with the idea that yoga as a practice, as a tradition today, has so much to offer to us, and we need to kind of access it. We need to kind of go into this tradition with an open mind, with a drive to kind of achieving well-being in a comprehensive and an integrated manner. Thank you. Namaste.